The maintenance alarm echoed through the lower decks of Halcyon Dock like a dying whale's song. Arthur Gray pressed his palm against the diagnostic panel, silencing the whale with practiced efficiency. Another coupling loose in Section C, another 16-hour shift ahead. Another day pretending the jokes he told to empty corridors were just as funny as when Margaret used to roll her eyes at them. "You know what the problem is with quantum couplings," he muttered to himself, grabbing his toolkit. "They're always in a superposition of working and not working until you observe them breaking down at 3 in the morning. The joke fell flat in the empty maintenance bay. 5 years since Margaret's accident, and he still couldn't shake the habit of narrating his life like she was there to groan at his terrible puns. Halcyon Dock sprawled before him as he emerged onto the main promenade, a testament to humanity's awkward adolescence in the Galactic Alliance. The station hung at the intersection of 17 major trade routes, its architecture a bizarre fusion of human pragmatism and alien aesthetics. Crystalline spires from the Altarian sector twisted alongside brutalist human hab-blocks, while the Gorvani had contributed their bioorganic modules that pulsed with an unsettling rhythm. Arthur weaved through the morning crowd, a river of species that still made his brain stutter sometimes. A group of Threnody merchants glided past, their translucent bodies flickering with internal bioluminescence as they haggled over shipping contracts. 2 human teenagers sat at a cafe, openly gawking at a Carathian whose 4 arms moved in perfect synchronization as she assembled some intricate device. 20 years since first contact, Arthur thought, and we're still the galaxy's awkward teenagers at the dinner table. The matrimonial concourse loomed ahead, its gaudy archway adorned with holographic representations of successful interspecies unions. Arthur usually took the long way around to avoid it. The Alliance's latest social experiment arranged marriages between species to foster diplomatic ties. The whole thing made his skin crawl. Love reduced to genetic compatibility scores and trade agreements. But today, the crowd was thicker than usual, forcing him through the main thoroughfare. The usual parade of hopeful matches stood in their designated areas, some with their families, others with official diplomatic escorts. The air thrummed with universal translators, working overtime, creating a babble of negotiations and nervous laughter. That's when he saw her. She stood alone at Dock 47, a figure that seemed to repel the crowd like opposing magnets. Where others wore ceremonial finery, she was clad in battle-scarred armor that had seen better centuries. Her skin was the color of sunset through storm clouds, marked with intricate scarification that told stories Arthur couldn't read. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Vertical pupils the color of old brass, staring at nothing with the weight of someone who had already seen everything. A Sakaran. Arthur had only seen them in military broadcasts, usually in formation behind their eternal warships. They were one of the oldest species in the Alliance, their lifespans measured in centuries rather than decades. This one looked like she had personally witnessed most of them. Waiting for someone, he found himself asking before his brain could stop his mouth. She turned those ancient eyes on him, and Arthur felt like a moth explaining itself to a star. "The hegemony delegation," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made his bones hum. "For the past 6 hours. Rough. Traffic from the hegemony systems has been brutal since that solar flare near. They're not coming." She cut him off with the certainty of someone who had recognized a familiar pattern. "The preliminary scans were completed yesterday. My age markers came back." Arthur noticed the data pad at her feet, its screen still displaying her biomedical profile, even upside down. He could read the highlighted section, chronological age, 347 standard years. Reproductive viability, suboptimal for dynasty continuation. "Suboptimal," she repeated, and for the first time, a crack appeared in her warrior's composure. 3.5 centuries of military service, 17 major campaigns, bearer of the Star of Ashkente, and I'm reduced to suboptimal. That's... Arthur scrambled for words. That's complete garbage. You're what? Barely middle-aged for a Sakharin. My grandmother lived to 98, and she said she was just getting interesting. A sound escaped her that might have been a laugh in another life. Your grandmother didn't have to justify her existence to a trade consortium looking for breeding stock. The words hung between them, like a challenge. Around them, Arthur became aware of how the crowd had created an even wider berth. Whispers in a dozen languages creating a susurrus of gossip. The abandoned bride, the aged warrior, the diplomatic embarrassment. Something hot and familiar rose in Arthur's chest. The same feeling he'd had when the hospital administrators had tried to explain why Margaret's emergency pod had been redirected to make room for a priority diplomatic patient. The same rage that had nowhere to go. "How much?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. The first genuine surprise he'd seen from her. "What?" "The marriage contract. How much did they pay the Sakharin High Command for your hand? Must be a decent amount if they're willing to wait 6 hours just to reject you." Her hand moved instinctively to her weapon, then stopped. 40 million credits, plus mining rights in the Colaris system. 40 million. Arthur let out a low whistle. And they're walking away because of a number on a medical scan. These hegemony folks sound like they need a lesson in basic economics. Not to mention basic decency. You speak strangely for a maintenance worker. I speak like someone who's tired of watching people get treated like merchandise. The words came out hotter than he intended. You know what, screw them. Screw all of this. He was moving before he realized it, striding toward the registration kiosk, where a bored-looking Altarian clerk processed marriage applications. The crowd parted, sensing drama like sharks scenting blood. "I need a marriage application," Arthur announced. The clerk's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. "Certainly. Do you have your diplomatic papers, genetic compatibility scan, trade agreements?" "Nope. Just good old-fashioned human stupidity and a functioning credit chip." Behind him, he heard the Sakharin warrior's armor clink as she moved. "What are you doing?" Arthur turned back to her, and for once, the joke came easy. "Well, I figure if the hegemony doesn't want 40 million credits worth of warrior bride, maybe they need their heads examined. I'm Arthur Gray, systems engineer, terrible cook, worst dancer, and apparently, your new fiancé if you'll have me." The silence that followed could have been measured in geological epochs. The entire concourse had stopped, dozens of species turning to stare at the spectacle. Somewhere, a universal translator hiccuped, trying to process the sheer audacity. The Sakharin warrior stepped forward, and Arthur was suddenly aware that she stood a full head taller than him, could probably bench press a shuttle, and had more confirmed kills than he had years of life. "You mock me," she said. But there was something else in her voice now. Uncertainty, perhaps. A sensation she hadn't felt in decades. "No," Arthur said, and he meant it. "I mock them. I mock this whole system that thinks it can put a price tag on people and call it diplomacy. You're not merchandise. You're not suboptimal. You're a decorated warrior who got stood up by idiots who wouldn't recognize value if it bit them in their collective asses. You don't even know my name. So tell me." Another eternal pause. Around them, recording devices hummed to life. Someone was already streaming this to the net. Arthur realized. By tomorrow, this would be on every newsfeed from here to the Magellanic Clouds. "Salith," she said finally. "Salith of the Crimson Banner. And you are either very brave or very stupid. Arthur Gray." "Definitely the second one," he agreed. "But here's the thing about being stupid. It means you don't overthink things. The hegemony spent months calculating genetic markers and trade routes and profit margins. Me, I see someone who deserved better getting treated like trash. And I think that's wrong. Simple as that. And you would bind yourself to me to prove a point. Who says it's just about proving a point? Arthur surprised himself with the honesty. 5 years ago, my wife died because someone decided she wasn't important enough to save. I've been going through the motions ever since, pretending the jokes still land, pretending the work still matters. Maybe I'm tired of pretending. Maybe I look at you and see someone else who knows what it's like to be measured and found wanting by people who never bothered to know you. Salith studied him with those ancient eyes, and Arthur had the distinct feeling he was being dissected on levels he couldn't comprehend. Then, slowly, she reached up and began unfastening her helmet. The crowd gasped. Arthur understood why. Removing armor was significant in Sakharan culture. He knew that much. It was a sign of vulnerability, of trust. Her face was angular, marked by centuries of experience, beautiful in the way that mountains were beautiful, shaped by time and struggle into something unique. A scar ran from her left temple to her jaw, pale against her sunset skin. You would take a wife you've known for 5 minutes. You would take a husband who makes terrible jokes and once got his hand stuck in a ventilation shaft for 6 hours. How did you... It's a funny story, actually. See, I was trying to retrieve this pen that had sentimental value, and... She held up a hand, and Arthur noticed that she had 6 fingers, each one adorned with a ring of different metals. Campaign markers. Probably. If we do this, she said, it will not be quiet. The Alliance, the media, our respective governments, they will all have opinions. Let them, Arthur said. I fix things for a living. Maybe it's time I fix something that actually matters. You cannot fix me, Arthur Gray. I am not broken. No, he agreed. But maybe the system is. Maybe 2 people choosing each other for no reason other than they want to is exactly what this place needs to see. The Altarian clerk cleared 3 throats. Excuse me, but if you're quite finished with the dramatic declarations, I have forms that need filling. Arthur glanced at Salith. So, want to make some bureaucrats very confused today. She laughed then. Really laughed. And it was like listening to an avalanche learn joy. Why not? I've fought in 17 campaigns. How much harder could marriage to a human be? Famous last words, Arthur muttered, turning back to the clerk. Right. We'll need the standard forms. None of that diplomatic nonsense. Just 2 people making a questionable decision. The clerk's eyes blinked rapidly. Sir, there are protocols. The Sakharan delegation alone will require... The Sakharan delegation can stuff their protocols. Salith interrupted, stepping beside Arthur. I stand here as myself alone. File it under personal choice. But the dowry... Keep it, she said. Let the hegemony explain to their shareholders why they left 40 million credits on the table, because they couldn't see past a number. Arthur felt a grin spreading across his face. I like her already. She's got financial sense and a flair for drama. We're going to get along just fine. The next hour blurred together in a haze of forms, biometric scans, and increasingly frantic comm calls from various diplomatic offices. Word spread through the station like wildfire. The human maintenance worker and the aged Sakharan bride. The marriage that nobody saw coming. I need to warn you, the clerk said for the 5th time. This union has not been approved by either of your species' diplomatic corps. There could be severe consequences. Noted, Arthur said, signing another form. Hey, Salith, they want to know about joint property holdings. I've got a cramped quarters on level C and a tool collection that's worth maybe 300 credits on a good day. I have my armor, my weapons, and a small estate on Sakhar that I haven't visited in 60 years, she replied. It's probably overrun with thorn beasts by now. Thorn beasts. Think of your earth wolverines, but larger and with a taste for metal. Romantic, we'll honeymoon there. Another functionary appeared. This one human, sweating profusely. Mr. Gray, I'm from the Terran Embassy. This is highly irregular. Perhaps if we could discuss. Nope, Arthur said cheerfully. Tell you what, though, you can be witness number one. Every wedding needs witnesses. What? Come on, it'll be fun. When's the last time you got to witness history? This isn't history. This is a diplomatic incident. Even better. Arthur turned to Salith. You know, I should probably ask. Any allergies I should know about dietary restrictions? Strong feelings about bathroom arrangements? I require significantly less sleep than humans, she said, seeming to enjoy the functionary's increasing distress. And I have a metabolic need for certain minerals that might alarm you. I can consume metal. Like, just straight-up metal. Small amounts. It aids in bone density maintenance. Huh, good to know. I sometimes eat cereal straight from the box at 3 a.m. I don't know what cereal is. Oh, we're fixing that immediately. Right after we're married. The crowd had swelled to fill the entire concourse. Arthur spotted humans and aliens alike. Some recording, others arguing. A few even taking bets. The universal translators were working overtime, creating a cacophony of languages and dialects. This is insane, someone shouted. Arthur thought it might have been another human. Maybe that's the point, he shouted back. When did sanity ever change anything? Salith leaned down, her voice low enough that only he could hear. You realize this won't end with just a ceremony. There will be challenges, legal battles, possibly even violence from those who see this as an insult to tradition. Salith, Arthur said, meeting her eyes. I spent 5 years dying slowly in these corridors. You want to give me something to fight for? Bring it on. You may regret that bravado. Probably, but at least I'll feel something while regretting it. The final form appeared before them, glowing with official seals from 6 different species bureaucracies. The marriage contract. Not the elaborate documents that the hegemony would have prepared. Just a simple declaration of intent between 2 individuals. Last chance, Salith said. For which one of us? She smiled then. A warrior's smile. All teeth and promise. I think I'm going to enjoy being married to you. Arthur Gray. See, terrible judgment. We're perfect for each other. They pressed their hands to the scanner simultaneously. The document flared with light, uploading itself to the Alliance's central database, becoming part of the permanent record. The crowd erupted. Cheers. Boos. Exclamations of disbelief in 24 languages. Somewhere, Arthur heard glass breaking. Someone was crying. Multiple people were updating their social feeds. Congratulations, the clerk said weakly. You are now legally bound in matrimony, according to Alliance law. May the stars help us all. Arthur turned to his new wife, a woman he'd known for exactly 93 minutes. So, want to get some coffee? I know this place on Level D that serves something almost like Earth espresso. We should probably get to know each other. Salith looked around at the chaos they'd created, at the functionaries scrambling to contain the situation, at the crowd that couldn't decide whether to celebrate or riot. Coffee, she said slowly, as if testing the word. Yes, let's have coffee while the galaxy burns around us. See, you're getting the hang of being married to a human already. They walked away from the registration kiosk hand in hand, her 6 fingers intertwined with his 5, leaving behind a small diplomatic crisis and a story that would be told in bars and boardrooms across the galaxy. Behind them, the morning shift at Halcyon Dock continued its rotation, indifferent to the small revolution that had just taken place in its heart. But in the years to come, that morning would be remembered as the day everything changed. The day a lonely maintenance worker and a discarded bride chose each other, and in doing so, chose to rewrite the rules. Arthur's communicator buzzed. 17 missed calls from his supervisor. He switched it off. Fair warning, he told Salith. I'm probably fired. Good, she said. Warriors don't marry maintenance workers anyway. They laughed together as they disappeared into the crowd. Two impossible people beginning an impossible life, while the universe scrambled to catch up. The coffee shop on Level D was exactly as Arthur had described it, almost like Earth espresso. The key word being almost. Salith held the cup between her 6 fingers, studying the dark liquid with the intensity of someone diffusing a bomb. "It's supposed to steam like that?" she asked. "That's the beauty of it. Old Earth tradition. We convinced ourselves that bitter water was sophistication." Arthur took a sip of his own cup, managing not to wince. "Though I think this one might actually be trying to dissolve my teeth." "Your teeth seem fragile. Are they all original?" "Mostly. Lost one in a bar fight when I was 22. Got it replaced with a synthetic that's supposedly stronger than the real thing." He tapped his jaw. "Never tested it, though." "A bar fight." Salith's voice carried amusement. "The maintenance worker has hidden depths." "Less hidden depths. More stupid youth. I thought I could take on 3 dock workers who were harassing a Gorvani trader. Turns out, I could not." "But you tried." "Story of my life. Spectacular failures with good intentions." They sat in relative quiet for a moment. The chaos of the morning temporarily held at bay by the simple act of sharing terrible coffee. Around them, the shop's other patrons tried very hard to pretend they weren't staring. A human Sakaran marriage was unprecedented. A spontaneous human Sakaran marriage was impossible. Yet, here they were. "Your wife," Salith said suddenly. "Tell me about her." Arthur's hand stilled halfway to his cup. "That's direct." "I am a direct person. We are married now. Arthur Gray. I should know who I'm being compared to." "You're not being—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "Her name was Margaret. She was a xenobiologist. Came to Halcyon to study the interaction between species in confined spaces. Said it was like watching evolution in fast forward. Smart. Brilliant. Way too good for a grease monkey like me. We met when I was fixing her lab equipment. She'd somehow managed to crosswire a specimen containment unit with the coffee maker. Nearly created a new form of caffeine-based life." "How did she die?" Another direct hit. Arthur found he appreciated it. 5 years of people dancing around the subject. And here was Salith asking like she was requesting a weather report. "Vacuum exposure. Seal failure in Section K during a transport realignment. She was in her lab when it happened. Emergency pods deployed. But," he swallowed, "there was a Threnody diplomatic vessel having engine problems. Station Command redirected the nearest pods to save their delegation first. Margaret's pod arrived 43 seconds too late." 43 seconds. Salith set down her cup with deliberate care. "The Threnody. They're one of the species pushing hardest for arranged marriages." "Yeah, funny how the universe works." "It's not funny at all." "No," Arthur agreed. "It's not." Salith's hand moved across the table, stopping just short of his. A gesture without contact, but somehow more intimate for it. "My first husband died in battle 186 years ago," she said. "My second chose the eternal sleep, rather than watch me go to war again. My third, we simply grew apart. When you live as long as Sakarans do, till death do us part, becomes a very different promise. And now you're stuck with a human who'll be gone in what, a blink of an eye for you. Perhaps. Or perhaps I'll die tomorrow. I've survived 17 campaigns. Arthur Gray. But I've never survived being married to someone who makes jokes in the face of certain doom." "Certain doom, I thought we were just pissing off some bureaucrats." As if summoned by his words. Arthur's communicator began buzzing again. This time, the ID showed a priority override. Station Administrator Kellich herself. "Should I?" he asked. "Are you employed by the station?" "Technically, yes." "Then no. Let them fire you in person. It's only polite." Arthur grinned and switched the communicator off again. Through the shop's viewport, he could see news drones hovering outside, their camera eyes seeking any angle on the galaxy's most unexpected couple. We should probably talk about the obvious, he said. Which obvious? There are several. The age thing. You're 347. I'm 45. You'll probably live another 3 centuries. I'll be lucky to see another 4 decades. Yes. That's it, yes. What would you have me say that I haven't considered it? I've buried 3 husbands. Arthur. I know exactly what I'm choosing. And you're choosing it anyway. The hegemony rejected me for being too old. You accepted me for the same reason. Which one of us is the fool? Before Arthur could answer, the shop's door chimed. 3 figures entered, 2 human security officers and a Gorvani administrator, whose bioluminescent patches were flashing in what Arthur recognized as extreme agitation. Mr. Gray, the Gorvani said, his translated voice warbling with stress. Administrator Kellich requires your immediate presence. I'm on my lunch break. It's 0900 hours. Early lunch. Union rules. The security officer stepped forward. Sir, please don't make this difficult. Salith stood. And suddenly, the small coffee shop felt much smaller. She hadn't drawn any weapons, hadn't even shifted into a combat stance. But something in the way she moved made both officers step back. My husband and I are enjoying coffee, she said pleasantly. Perhaps you could wait outside. Ma'am, with respect, this is a station security matter. And I'm a Sakharan warrior with diplomatic immunity. Which would you like to test first? The Gorvani administrator's patches went from orange to deep purple. Please, this is not... We simply need Mr. Gray to fill out some paperwork. His sudden change in marital status requires updates to his employment files. Arthur stood, placing a hand on Salith's arm. The armor was warm to the touch, almost alive. It's fine. They're just doing their jobs. He looked at the administrator. Tell Kellich I'll be there in an hour. She said immediately, and I said an hour, unless she wants to make this a bigger scene than it already is. The administrator's patches cycled through several colors before settling on a resigned blue. 1 hour. Mr. Gray, please. They left, the security officers looking relieved to exit with all their limbs attached. Arthur sat back down, noticed his coffee had gone cold. You didn't have to do that, he said. Yes, I did. Respect is established early or not at all. Salith returned to her seat with the same fluid grace. Besides, I wanted to finish our conversation. Right, the obvious things? No, I want to know about your jokes. What? You use humor as armor. Why? Arthur opened his mouth for a quick deflection, then caught her expression. Direct questions deserve direct answers. Because if I don't laugh, I'll scream. And once I start screaming, I might never stop. That's honest. You bring it out in me. Good. Honesty will help when the real challenges come. She paused. You know they're already broadcasting about us. Yeah. The human news calls it love at first sight. Clever. The Sakharan feeds are less kind. Several of my former commanders have already issued statements disavowing any connection to my choices. Having second thoughts. No, but you should know what you've bound yourself to. I'm not just old by their standards. Arthur, I'm controversial. A war hero who refused to die gloriously in battle like I was supposed to. Who kept fighting, kept surviving, kept demanding my place long after tradition said I should step aside. Sounds familiar, Arthur said. Except instead of war, I just kept showing up to fix things. Same broken systems. Same pretense that everything's working fine. Maybe that's why I snapped when I saw you standing there. Because you recognized a kindred spirit. Because I recognized someone else who'd been measured by standards that don't make any damn sense. His communicator buzzed again. This time, the ID showed something that made his blood run cold. Terran Central Authority. That's not good, he muttered. Answer it. You sure? I've faced plasma cannons and radiation storms. I think we can handle a phone call. Arthur activated the comm. A holographic projection materialized above the table, a human woman in the crisp uniform of a diplomatic attaché, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Gray, I'm Deputy Director Sarah Reeves from the TCA. We need to discuss your situation. Marriage. The word you're looking for is marriage." "Yes. Well, your marriage has created some complications. The hegemony has filed a formal complaint. They claim you've interfered with a diplomatic arrangement worth 40 million credits. 40 million credits they walked away from," Arthur pointed out. "Can't interfere with something that doesn't exist." Nevertheless, they're demanding compensation. They say the Sakharan military promised them exclusive negotiating rights. Salith leaned into the projection's field of view. "The Sakharan military has no claim on me. I resigned my commission effective this morning." Reeves' carefully neutral expression cracked slightly. "You resigned after 3 centuries of service. I found something worth more than rank. Mrs. Gray." Reeves struggled with the name. "Do you understand what you've given up? Your pension, your standing, your entire position in Sakharan society?" "I understand perfectly. Do you understand that I'm no longer your concern?" "Actually, that's where you're wrong. As the spouse of a human citizen, you're now under Terran protective jurisdiction, which means your problems become our problems." "Is that a threat?" Arthur asked. "It's a reality. The hegemony is a major trading partner. They supply 30% of our helium-3. We can't afford to antagonize them over a personal matter." "A personal matter," Arthur repeated. "Is that what marriage is now?" "When it affects interstellar relations, yes." The projection flickered as Reeves consulted something off-screen. "Mr. Gray, I'm authorized to make you an offer. The TCA will compensate you for any inconvenience if you agree to an annulment. We'll handle the paperwork, smooth things over with the hegemony, and everyone walks away satisfied." "How much?" Reeves looked relieved. 50,000 credits, tax-free." 50,000, Arthur looked at Salith. "What do you think, wife? Are we worth 50,000 credits?" "I was worth 40 million this morning," Salith said dryly. "I'd say I'm depreciating rapidly." "Counteroffer," Arthur said to the projection. "You tell the hegemony to stuff their complaints up whatever orifice they use for that purpose, and we'll agree not to go to the media with a story about how Earth trades its citizens' freedom for helium." "Mr. Gray, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. Reasonable is telling you no. Unreasonable would be what my wife does if you keep pushing." "Is that a threat?" "From me, no, I just fix things. But she's got 17 campaigns worth of unreasonable behavior saved up." Salith smiled, showing teeth that looked entirely too sharp. "I once held a bridge against an entire Korthax battalion, with nothing but a damaged plasma rifle in spite. Would you like to test what I can do with a marriage license and a sense of righteous indignation?" Reeves' image flickered again. When it stabilized, her face had taken on a harder edge. "Fine, but know this Earth won't protect you if this goes badly. You're on your own." "Weren't we always?" Arthur asked. But the projection had already cut out. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the coffee shop had gone deadly quiet. Everyone pretending they hadn't just witnessed a diplomatic incident over pastries and synthetic caffeine. "Well," Arthur said finally, "that went well." "You just told Earth's government to go fuck themselves." "Language, dear. We're in public." Salith laughed, that avalanche sound that Arthur was already getting addicted to. "You're insane." "Probably. But hey, at least we're establishing a pattern. Meet, marry, tell major governments to piss off, all before lunch." "What comes after lunch?" "Traditionally paperwork, but given how this day is going, probably an international incident." "Interstellar," she corrected. "Think bigger, husband." The word sent an unexpected jolt through him. Husband. He was someone's husband again. Someone who could bend steel with her bare hands and had just casually resigned from 3 centuries of military service. "We should go," he said. I've got an administrator to disappoint. And you've probably got—" He paused. "What do you have to do? Actually, where were you staying?" "Hegemony provided quarters, which I assume are no longer available." "Right. Well, my place is small, but it's got a great view of the maintenance bay. Very romantic. Lots of exposed ductwork and the gentle sound of atmospheric processors. Sounds perfect. I haven't slept somewhere uncomfortable in decades." They stood to leave, and Arthur noticed how the crowd parted for them. Not the respectful distance given to Salith's warrior status, but the wary space afforded to unstable elements, to people who'd chosen to break the rules. Outside the coffee shop, the news drones immediately swarmed closer. Questions peppered them in a dozen languages, the universal translators creating a cacophony of curiosity. "Mr. Gray, how do you respond to accusations of marriage fraud?" "Salith, have you really resigned your commission? What about the hegemony's demands? Is it true you've known each other less than 2 hours?" Arthur looked at Salith. "Want to give them something for the evening feeds." "What did you have in mind?" Instead of answering, he reached up, standing on his toes to reach her face, and kissed her. It was awkward, unpracticed, complicated by height difference and armor, and the fact that Sakaran mouths had a slightly different configuration than human ones. It was also perfect. The drones went crazy. The crowd gasped. Somewhere, a Threnody fainted. When they parted, Salith's brass-colored eyes had darkened to burnished gold. "You're going to be trouble," she said. "Counting on it," he replied. "Now come on. Let's go make Administrator Kellich's day worse." They walked hand in hand through the station, a human and a Sakaran writing new rules with every step. Behind them, the news feeds exploded with updates, opinions, and outrage. The marriage that shouldn't exist had not only survived its first hour, but had essentially declared war on anyone who thought otherwise. In the coffee shop they'd left behind, an enterprising owner was already updating the menu. The Gray Special, it would be called. Coffee strong enough to fuel a revolution, served with a side of institutional defiance. It would become their bestseller within the week. Administrator Kellich's office occupied the prime real estate of Halcyon Dock's command section, with floor-to-ceiling viewports offering a spectacular view of the trade routes. The administrator herself was less spectacular. A middle-aged human woman who looked like she'd aged a year for every month in the position. "Sit," she said without looking up from her displays. Arthur sat. Salith remained standing, a subtle power play that wasn't lost on anyone. "Do you have any idea," Kellich began, "how many forms I've had to file in the last 2 hours? The hegemony wants compensation. The Sakaran military wants their warrior back. The Terran Central Authority wants your head on a pike. And the Galactic Marriage Registry is having what can only be described as a bureaucratic seizure." "Sounds like a busy morning," Arthur said. "Don't." Kellich finally looked up, and Arthur was surprised to see exhaustion rather than anger. "Don't make jokes. Not about this. You've stumbled into something bigger than your personal rebellion against the universe." "Enlighten us," Salith said. Kellich gestured to her displays, bringing up a holographic map of the galaxy. Trade routes appeared as golden threads, connecting thousands of worlds in an intricate web. The arranged marriage system isn't just about diplomacy. It's about maintaining the balance. Every union represents trade agreements, military alliances, resource sharing. When the hegemony arranged to marry one of their scions to a Sakaran warrior, they weren't just buying a bride. They were buying into a military tradition, access to strategic knowledge, genetic diversity for their breeding programs. Breeding programs. Salith's voice could have frozen stars. "How progressive." "You think I like it," Kellich snapped. "You think any of us like reducing people to commodities, but it's what keeps the peace. It's what prevents the kind of wars that nearly destroyed half the galaxy before the Alliance." "So we sacrifice individuals for the greater good," Arthur said. "Funny. I heard similar logic when my wife died." Kellich flinched. That was different. Was it priority given to diplomatic relations over human lives? Sounds exactly the same to me. You're fired, by the way, Kellich said, almost as an afterthought. Effective immediately. I need to at least make that gesture to show Earth is taking this seriously. Fair enough. Do I get to keep my tools? Arthur. Kellich rubbed her temples. You're not hearing me. This isn't just about you anymore. There are already protests on 6 worlds. The Progressive Coalition is calling you heroes. The Traditionalist Bloc wants you arrested. The hegemony is threatening to cut off helium shipments. The Sakarans are split between those who support Salith's choice and those who want her tried for desertion. Desertion. Salith straightened, and Arthur felt the temperature in the room drop. I served with honor for 3.5 centuries. I earned the right to choose my own end. Not according to your military code. You were property of the Sakaran state, bound by oath until death or formal release. Your resignation this morning, they're not accepting it. Then, they can come and retrieve me, Salith said simply. I'll be interested to see who volunteers for that mission. A new alarm chimed on Kellich's display. She glanced at it and paled. What now? Arthur asked. High Chancellor Drelmach just entered the system, 3 hours ahead of schedule. The name hit the room like a physical force. Even Arthur, politically oblivious as he tried to be, knew that name. Drelmach was the de facto leader of the Traditionalist Bloc, a Altarian who'd built his career on maintaining species purity and cultural preservation. His speeches about the dangers of interspecies mingling were required viewing on a dozen worlds. He's coming here, Arthur asked. Emergency session of the Alliance Council, called specifically to address the human contamination of sacred marriage rites. Kellich looked between them. He's going to make an example of you. Let him try, Salith growled. You don't understand. Kellich pulled up another display, showing Drelmach's political connections. He has the backing of the major trading consortiums, the military support of the hegemony, and 3 other systems. If he decides to push this, really push it, we could be looking at humanity's expulsion from the Alliance. Arthur felt the words settle in his stomach like lead. He'd wanted to make a statement, not start an interstellar incident. But then, he looked at Salith, saw the warrior who'd given up everything on the word of a maintenance worker she'd just met, and found his resolve. Then I guess we'd better make our case, he said. Your case, Kellich laughed bitterly. You're a fired maintenance worker who married an alien on a whim. What case could you possibly make? The truth, Arthur said. That 2 people should be allowed to choose each other without the galaxy's permission. The truth. Kellich shook her head. The truth doesn't win against politics. Then maybe it's time that changed. They left Kellich's office with a 72-hour deadline. Drelmach's emergency session would convene in 3 days, and Arthur and Salith would be required to appear. Not requested. Required. We need a plan, Arthur said as they walked through the administrative sector. I have a plan. We show up. I challenge anyone who speaks against us to single combat, and we settle this the old way. That's not really how Alliance politics work. Politics, Salith spat the word. In my day, disputes were settled with blade and blood. Clean. Honest. In your day, Arthur pointed out gently, half the galaxy was at war. She stopped walking, turned to face him. You think I'm a relic? I think you're magnificent. But I also think if we're going to win this, we need to be smarter than they expect. And how do we do that? Arthur's mind raced. He was a systems engineer. He fixed things by understanding how they worked, finding the weak points, the places where pressure could be applied. We need allies, he said finally. People who benefit from challenging the status quo. You mentioned the Progressive Coalition. Young idealists, no real power. But they have voices. And in politics, sometimes voices matter more than weapons. He paused. We also need to understand why Drelmach is really coming. This feels too fast, too organized, like he was waiting for an excuse. You think we were set up? I think the hegemony backing out of your marriage wasn't random. Someone wanted you humiliated, discarded. They just didn't expect a random human to interfere. Salith's eyes narrowed. If this was orchestrated, then someone has been planning this for a while. Question is who and why. They reached Arthur's quarters, a modest suite that looked even smaller, with Salith's armored form inside it. She moved through the space carefully, taking in the accumulated detritus of a life lived in routine. Tools organized obsessively on one wall. A few photographs, mostly of Earth. One of Margaret laughing at something off camera. A bed that hadn't been slept in properly in months, surrounded by scattered work orders and technical manuals. "This is how you live?" she asked. "This is how I exist," Arthur corrected. "Living stopped a while ago." She picked up the photo of Margaret, studied it with those ancient eyes. She was beautiful. She was everything. Arthur took the photo gently, set it back in its place. Smart, funny, kind. She made me want to be better than I was. And now I've got you. A warrior who could kill me with her pinky finger, and who resigned her commission for a complete stranger. He turned to face her. Why did you do it? Really? Not the joke answer. The real one. Salith began removing her armor, each piece coming off with practiced efficiency. Underneath, she wore a simple shipsuit that revealed the extent of her scarring. Battle marks covered her sunset skin like a map of violence survived. "Because I'm tired," she said simply. "Tired of being what everyone expects. The eternal warrior, the perfect soldier, the breeding stock for someone else's ambition. When you offered, it wasn't marriage you were offering. It was choice. And if I turn out to be a terrible choice, then at least it was mine to make." She sat on his bed, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked vulnerable. Not weak, never that, but human, in a way that transcended species. "I need to tell you something," she said, "about why I was really at the dock." Arthur sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I'm listening." The Sakharan military didn't just agree to the hegemony marriage. They orchestrated it. I've become inconvenient, too old, too experienced, too unwilling to quietly fade into retirement. There are younger warriors who want my position, my honors, but they couldn't simply dismiss me, not without cause. So they arranged a marriage that would fail. Exactly. Make me damaged goods. Too old for the hegemony. Too proud to accept the insult quietly. They expected me to either accept the humiliation or do something violent that would justify my removal. She looked at him. They didn't expect you. No one ever expects the maintenance department, Arthur said, trying for levity, but his mind was spinning. This wasn't just about you. This was about sending a message that anyone who doesn't fit the system gets discarded. Yes. Then we definitely need allies. People who've been measured and found wanting by standards that don't make sense. He stood, pacing now, the engineer in him fully engaged. The progressive coalition is obvious, but we need more. Veterans who've been pushed aside, interspecies couples who've faced discrimination. Hell, anyone who's ever been told they're too old, too different, too inconvenient for the system. You want to start a movement. I want to fix a broken system, and the first step is showing people it's broken. Salith watched him pace, something like wonder in her eyes. You really believe we can win this? I believe we've already won. We got married. We chose each other. Everything else is just arguing about paperwork. A chime from the door interrupted them. Arthur checked the security feed and groaned. 3 figures stood outside a human woman with press credentials, a Threnody with recording equipment, and a young Altarian whose 3 eyes were wide with excitement. Media, he said. Ignore them. Can't. Not if we want to control the narrative. He looked at Salith. You trust me. I married you after knowing you for 5 minutes. Trust seems redundant at this point. Arthur opened the door, plastering on his best confused maintenance worker smile. Can I help you? The human woman, sharp-faced and sharper-eyed, immediately launched into her pitch. Tara Hendricks, Galactic News Network. Mr. Chagray, the entire galaxy is talking about your marriage. Would you care to comment on accusations that this is all a publicity stunt? A publicity stunt. Arthur scratched his head. Lady, I just got fired, threatened by multiple governments, and married to someone who could use me as a toothpick. If this is a publicity stunt, I'm doing it wrong. But surely you must have known the implications. I knew I saw someone being treated like garbage and I did something about it. Since when is that complicated? The Altarian pushed forward, all 3 eyes blinking rapidly. Is it true that Salith of the Crimson Banner has resigned her commission, that she's abandoned 3 centuries of honor for a human she just met? Salith appeared in the doorway. No armor now, just warrior and woman. I abandoned nothing. I chose to stop being property and start being a person. If that threatens 3 centuries of tradition, perhaps the tradition needs examining. But the Sakaran military code also says a warrior should die in battle rather than age into irrelevance. I've chosen a different battle. She put her hand on Arthur's shoulder, 6 fingers spanning easily across it. One worth fighting. The questions came rapid fire after that. Why now? Why each other? What about the hegemony's demands? What about humanity's standing in the alliance? What about the emergency council session? Arthur fielded them as best he could, sticking to simple truths. They chose each other. The system that tried to stop them was wrong. People should matter more than politics. But it was Salith who delivered the line that would dominate the news cycles. You ask, what about tradition? What about honor? I'll tell you about honor. Honor is my husband seeing a stranger abandoned and refusing to walk away. Honor is choosing compassion over convenience. If your traditions can't recognize that, then your traditions are without honor. The reporters left with enough material to fuel a dozen segments. Arthur closed the door and slumped against it. That went well, he said. You're a terrible liar. I know. But did you see their faces when you talked about honor? That's going to play well with the military demographic. You're thinking like a politician. I'm thinking like an engineer. We need to build a coalition strong enough to withstand Drelmach. That means understanding what makes people tick. He moved to his terminal, started pulling up data. Look at this. Social media metrics from the last 6 hours. We're trending on every major platform. The hashtag #JoshChoice_not_commerce has gone viral. I don't understand half of those words. Right. Sorry. Basically, people are talking about us. A lot. And not just humans. Look. He pulled up translated posts. Gorvani youth comparing their own arranged marriages to ours. Threnodi philosophers debating the nature of choice. Even some Sakarans. He paused. Defending you. Salith leaned over his shoulder, reading. Her expression softened at some of the messages. Salith of the Crimson Banner gave everything for Sakar. She's earned the right to take something for herself. That's unexpected. You've got supporters. We just need to mobilize them before... Another alarm. This time from the station's public address system. Attention all residents and visitors of Halcyon Dock. High Chancellor Drelmach will be arriving in 2 hours for an emergency session of the Alliance Council. All non-essential personnel are advised to remain in quarters during the Chancellor's visit. 2 hours, Arthur said. He's really not wasting time. Good. Neither should we. Salith moved to where she'd placed her armor. If we're going to face him, I should look the part. No. She turned, surprised. No. Think about it. He expects Salith the warrior. The living weapon. What if we give him Salith, the person, instead?
I don't follow.
You've been armor and rank for 3 centuries. Maybe it's time to show them who you are without it. And who is that? Arthur moved to her, took her 6-fingered hands in his 5-fingered ones. The woman who chose love over duty, who walked away from everything because she believed in something better. That's who we show them. You're asking me to be vulnerable in front of my enemies. I'm asking you to be powerful in a way they don't understand. Weapons and armor. They know how to fight those. But authenticity, vulnerability, choice made from love, rather than fear, that terrifies them. Salith stared at him for a long moment. How did a maintenance worker learn to think like this? 5 years of fixing broken systems. You start to see the patterns. The places where a little pressure makes everything shift. He squeezed her hands. Trust me. Against all logic and reason, yes. They spent the next hour preparing. Not for battle in any traditional sense, but for something harder. Arthur helped Salith choose clothing from the station's shops. Simple garments that emphasized her personhood rather than her warrior status. She helped him understand the political dynamics he'd been ignoring his whole life. The web of alliances and obligations that Drelmach would use against them. The key is the undecided, she explained. Drelmach has his block. We have our supporters. But the majority are waiting to see which way the wind blows. So we need to be the wind. That's either profound or ridiculous. Story of my life. Why stop now? When the announcement came that Drelmach had docked, they were ready. Or as ready as 2 people could be to face down the political might of a galaxy that didn't want them to exist. They walked hand in hand toward the council chambers, past crowds that had gathered despite the lockdown order. Some shouted support, others hurled abuse. Most just watched, witnesses to a moment that would echo through history. At the entrance to the chambers, a phalanx of hegemony guards blocked their path. Salith of Sakar, one announced. You are under arrest for desertion and breach of contract. I think you're mistaken, Arthur said pleasantly. This is Mrs. Gray, and she's with me. The moment stretched, taut as a wire about to snap. Then Salith laughed. That avalanche sound, but lighter now, almost free. He's right, she said. Salith of Sakar died this morning. I'm just Salith Gray now, and I'm curious to see who has the authority to arrest someone who no longer exists. The guards hesitated, clearly not briefed for philosophy. And in that hesitation, Arthur and Salith walked past them, into the chambers where the galaxy waited to judge their impossible choice. The Alliance Council chambers had been designed to intimidate. The ceiling soared 40 meters high, studded with crystalline formations that cast rainbow shadows across the assembled delegates. 300 seats arranged in concentric circles, each positioned to give its occupant a clear view of the central platform where petitioners stood to make their case. Arthur had seen images of it before, standing in the center, feeling the weight of 600 eyes from a dozen species, was something else entirely. Steady, Salith murmured beside him. She'd kept her word, appearing not as a warrior, but as a woman. The simple blue dress they'd found made her look younger somehow, despite her centuries. Or perhaps it was the way she held herself, chin high, but without the rigid military bearing. I'm steady, Arthur lied. His palms were sweating, and he could feel his heartbeat in his throat. 5 years of hiding in maintenance tunnels hadn't prepared him for this. High Chancellor Drelmach entered from the opposite side, and the chamber fell silent. The Altarian moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything, his 3 eyes surveying the room with satisfaction. His robes were traditional, covered in patterns that indicated his various titles and achievements. Arthur thought he looked like a decorated Christmas tree, but kept that observation to himself. Distinguished colleagues, Drelmach began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. We gather today to address a crisis that threatens the very foundations of our alliance. Drama Queen, Arthur muttered. Shh, Salith warned, but he caught the ghost of a smile. For generations, Drelmach continued, our marriage protocols have maintained peace between species. They have prevented wars, fostered trade, created bonds that transcend individual desires for the greater good. And now, that sacred institution has been vandalized by impulsive action and human arrogance. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Arthur noted who nodded agreement, who looked uncomfortable, who remained neutral. Engineer's habit, cataloging the system. I call upon the perpetrators of this farce to explain themselves, Drelmach said, turning his three-eyed gaze on them. Arthur Gray, failed maintenance worker, Salith, deserter, and oathbreaker. Justify your actions to this assembly. Arthur stepped forward before his fear could stop him. With respect, Chancellor, you've got our titles wrong. I beg your pardon.
I'm not a failed maintenance worker. I'm a successful husband. And my wife isn't a deserter. She's a 3-century veteran who chose retirement. Get the basics right before you start the grandstanding.
Gasps echoed through the chamber. Nobody spoke to Drelmach that way. Your ignorance of protocol is not charming, Mr. Gray, Drelmach said coldly. It merely confirms humanity's unfitness for civilized discourse. Funny thing about protocol, Arthur said, warming to his theme. It's just another system. And I fix systems for a living. Want to know what's wrong with this one? I'm certain you'll enlighten us. It's built on a lie. The lie that people are commodities. That love is a trade agreement. That peace can only be bought with flesh. Arthur gestured around the chamber. Look at this place. All this grandeur. All this ceremony. And for what to prettify the fact that we're running a galaxy-wide dating service where the currency is lives. The marriage protocols have prevented 17 major wars, a Threnody delegate interjected. And how many individual wars have they started? Arthur shot back. How many people trapped in marriages they didn't choose? How many Saliths told they're too old, too inconvenient, too human to matter?
I am not human, Salith said quietly.
No, but you were treated like humans get treated. Disposable, replaceable, worth only what someone else decides you're worth. Arthur's voice cracked slightly. My wife died because someone decided she was worth less than a trade delegation. Salith was abandoned because someone decided she was worth less than a younger model. The system doesn't prevent suffering. It just redistributes it to people too powerless to complain. Emotional manipulation, Drelmach dismissed. Personal tragedy does not invalidate centuries of successful policy. Then let's talk success, Salith said, stepping forward. The assembly shifted, recognizing the warrior, even without her armor. I served the Alliance for 347 years. I bled on 16 worlds, lost fingers twice, was legally dead for 3 minutes on Caraxus Prime. I earned every honor our military can bestow, and my reward to be sold to the highest bidder when my joints started creaking. You were offered an honorable marriage. I was offered slavery with better PR. Salith's voice carried the kind of authority that came from facing death and winning. The hegemony didn't want a wife. They wanted breeding stock with a military pedigree. When the scans showed I was past optimal fertility, they walked away, not because they cared about me, but because I couldn't give them the hybrid super soldiers they were shopping for. The hegemony's requirements were clearly stated. The hegemony can choke on their requirements. The vulgarity in such a formal setting sent another ripple through the crowd. I'm not a weapon to be decommissioned. I'm not a prize to be won. I'm a person who chose love over duty. And if that threatens your precious stability, then your stability deserves to fall. Drelmach's eyes narrowed. You speak of love as if you know the meaning. You met this human mere hours ago. And I knew within minutes he saw me clearer than anyone had in decades. Salith reached for Arthur's hand. He looked at me standing abandoned at that dock and saw not a political problem or a diplomatic asset, but a person deserving of dignity. That's more than the Alliance ever gave me. Pretty words, Drelmach said. But words don't maintain order. Mr. Gray, do you truly expect us to believe you married this woman out of pure altruism? That there was no calculation, no desire for fame or profit? Arthur felt the trap in the question. Deny calculation too strongly. And he'd seem naive. Admit it. And he'd seem mercenary. I married her because I was angry, he said finally. Angry at a universe that keeps taking things from people who don't have enough to lose. Angry at systems that grind people up and call it peace. Angry enough to do something stupid that might accidentally change things. So you admit this was about rebellion, not love. Can't it be both? Arthur squeezed Salith's hand. I didn't know I'd love her when I proposed. I just knew someone had to stand up and say, enough. The love came after, when she laughed at my terrible jokes, when she trusted me enough to take off her armor, when she chose to stand with me against all this. He gestured at the chamber. That's how real love works, Chancellor. It's not negotiated in advance. It happens despite our best efforts to prevent it. How terribly human, Drelmok sneered. Yes, Arthur agreed. Terribly, wonderfully, chaotically human. And maybe that's what the Alliance needs. Less calculation, more chance. Less protocol, more choice. A younger delegate, a Gorvani whose patches flickered with nervous energy, raised a hand. May I ask a question? Drelmok looked irritated but nodded. Mr. Gray, Mrs. Gray, the Gorvani said. What happens when your human lifespan ends? When Salith has centuries ahead and you have decades at best? Arthur had expected this question, but it still hit like a punch. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe she'll mourn me and move on. Maybe she'll marry someone else. Someone she actually chooses. Maybe she'll spend the rest of her centuries telling people about the idiot human who proposed to her at a dock. But whatever happens, it'll be her choice. That's all any of us can ask for. Sentiment, Drelmok spat. This is what humans bring to the Alliance. Sentiment over sense. Emotion over order. They would have us all choosing partners based on fleeting feelings, rather than careful consideration. Actually, a new voice interjected, the humans might be onto something. All eyes turned to the speaker, an elderly Carathian, whose 4 arms were folded in a gesture of contemplation. Dr. Marin. Arthur recognized, one of the Alliance's leading xenosociologists. Dr. Marin, Drelmok said carefully. Surely you're not supporting this chaos. I'm supporting data, she replied. I've been studying human integration into the Alliance for 20 years. Do you know what makes them unique among member species? Their recklessness, their adaptability. Humans form more successful interspecies relationships than any other member of the Alliance. Not because they're genetically superior or culturally advanced, but because they're willing to try, to take risks, to choose connection over calculation. Anecdotal evidence. Empirical evidence. Dr. Marin produced a data pad. 43% of human-alien marriages are self-initiated, rather than arranged. Of those, 78% report high satisfaction rates. Compare that to arranged marriages, where satisfaction peaks at 34%. Satisfaction is not stability. No, but it's sustainability. Happy people don't start wars. Chancellor. Trapped people do. The chamber erupted in discussion. Delegates turned to their neighbors, arguments breaking out in multiple languages. Arthur caught fragments: tradition versus progress, stability versus freedom, the old ways versus the terrifying new. Order, Drelmok commanded. We are not here to debate statistics. We are here to address a breach of protocol that threatens your control, Arthur interrupted. That's what this is really about. Isn't it not tradition or stability, or the greater good? Control. The power to decide who marries whom, who's worth what, who gets saved and who gets sacrificed. You dare. I dare because I've got nothing left to lose. You already took my job. The Sakarans want my wife. The hegemony wants our heads. What else can you threaten us with? Humanity's expulsion from the Alliance? The words fell like a hammer. The chamber went silent. You would punish an entire species for the actions of one man. Salith's voice was deadly quiet. I would protect the Alliance from contamination, Drelmok replied. Humans have been probationary members for 20 years. This incident proves they're not ready for full integration. Actually, Arthur said, his mind racing, I think it proves we're exactly what the Alliance needs. Explain. You've built a system so rigid it can't bend without breaking, so focused on preventing big conflicts that it creates millions of small ones. People trapped in loveless marriages, veterans discarded when they're no longer useful, individuals sacrificed for trade deals. He looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as he could. Humans might be chaotic, but we're also creative. We find solutions you can't see because you're too invested in the problem. You call destroying our institutions a solution. I call giving people choices a solution. Not abandoning arranged marriages entirely, but making them one option among many. Letting those who want tradition have it, and those who want freedom choose it. Evolution, not revolution. And if it fails, if your choices lead to chaos, then we'll adapt, like humans always do, like the Alliance should learn to do. Arthur felt Salith's pride through their joined hands. The galaxy is changing, whether you like it or not. The question is whether the Alliance changes with it or gets left behind. More murmurs, but different now. Thoughtful rather than outraged. Arthur saw younger delegates nodding, older ones looking uncomfortable, the tectonic plates of opinion shifting. Drelmok sensed it too. His 3 eyes blazed with fury. You speak of change as if it's inevitable, but change can be stopped. Must be stopped when it threatens order. Whose order? Salith challenged. Yours. The hegemonies, the power structures that benefit from keeping people in boxes. She released Arthur's hand and stepped forward, every inch the warrior despite her simple dress. I've fought for order my entire life, bled for it, killed for it. And you know what I learned. Order without choice is just oppression with better marketing. Says the deserter. Says the woman who chose love over fear. She turned to address the assembly. Look at me. Really look. I'm not young. I'm not optimal breeding stock. I'm not what the hegemony ordered. But I'm happy. For the first time in decades. I'm genuinely happy. Because someone saw me as more than my utility. That's what choice gives us. The chance to be more than our designated functions. Beautiful rhetoric, Drelmok said coldly. But this assembly deals in reality, not fairy tales. I call for an immediate vote. The question before us is simple. Do we allow this travesty to stand? Or do we annul this illegal union and consider sanctions against humanity for their violation of Alliance protocols? Point of order, Dr. Marin interjected. Any vote must be preceded by full debate. Alliance Charter, Section 12. Drelmok's eyes narrowed. Full debate could take days. Then we'd better get started, Arthur said cheerfully. I've got nowhere else to be. Unemployed, remember. What followed was 6 hours of the most intense political theater Arthur had ever witnessed. Delegates rose to speak for and against, sharing stories of successful arranged marriages and failed ones, of tradition upheld and tradition transcended. The progressives came out in force, younger members of various species who'd been waiting for a crack in the system. The traditionalists rallied behind Drelmok, but their unity showed fractures. The surprise came from the veterans. One by one, retired soldiers from multiple species stood to speak. They talked of service and sacrifice, of being discarded when no longer useful. Salith's story resonated with those who'd given their lives to the Alliance only to find themselves abandoned when age or injury made them inconvenient. The warrior Salith earned the right to choose. A scarred Threnodi veteran declared, "If we deny her that, We tell every soldier their service means nothing once they're past their prime. Through it all, Arthur and Salith stood in the center, weathering attacks and absorbing support. Arthur found himself oddly calm. This was just another system to understand, another problem to solve. The variables were more complex than a failing atmospheric processor, but the principles were the same. Find the pressure points, apply force, watch the system respond. As the 6th hour drew to a close, Drelmok made his final play. "Enough," he commanded. "We have heard arguments, anecdotes, and appeals to emotion. But one fact remains unchanged. These two individuals violated established protocol. If we allow this to stand, we invite chaos. I call for the vote." "Actually," Arthur said, "I'd like to make one final statement." "You've spoken enough." "Actually, he hasn't," Salith interrupted. "Alliance law grants both parties in a marriage dispute the right to final statements. Unless you're abandoning protocol when it doesn't suit you." Drelmok's jaw clenched. "Proceed." Arthur looked around the chamber, at hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds, all trying to impose order on the beautiful chaos of life. "You know what I've learned fixing things," he began. "The best solutions are often the simplest, the ones that make you slap your forehead and say, 'Why didn't we think of that?' So here's my simple solution. Let us stay married, not because it's legally correct or politically advantageous, but because we want to be. If it fails, if we end up hating each other, if the cultural differences are too much, then you'll have your proof that choice doesn't work. But if we succeed, if we build something real across species and centuries and all the impossible differences between us, then maybe you'll have proof of something else. That love is stronger than law. That choice is stronger than control. That two people who shouldn't work can choose to make it work anyway." He reached for Salith's hand again. "We're not asking you to tear down your system. We're asking you to let us exist outside it. To be the exception that maybe, eventually, helps write new rules. Rules based on consent instead of contract. On love instead of liability. On the radical idea that people matter more than protocols." "Is that all?" Drelmok asked acidly. "No," Salith said. "I have something to add." She moved to the center of the platform, commanding attention with stillness. "Chancellor Drelmok speaks of tradition as if it's sacred. But tradition is just what people did yesterday, repeated enough times that we forget why we started. The tradition of arranged marriages began to prevent wars between species who didn't understand each other. But we understand each other now. We've fought together, traded together, built together for generations. Maybe it's time our traditions caught up with our reality." She looked directly at Drelmok. "You fear chaos. I've lived through chaos, real chaos, wars that burned worlds, plagues that erased civilizations. This," she gestured to herself and Arthur, "this is two people choosing happiness. If that terrifies you, perhaps you should examine why." "Are you finished?" "One more thing," Salith smiled, and it transformed her face. "I've been a soldier for 3.5 centuries. I've followed orders, upheld traditions, been everything the Alliance asked me to be. I've earned the right to be selfish, to choose love over duty, to pick a partner who makes me laugh instead of one who advances someone else's agenda. And if you can't see the justice in that, then you're not the leaders the Alliance needs." Silence descended on the chamber. Arthur felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge, ready to fall either way. "The vote," Drelmok said finally. "All in favor of annulling this union and censuring humanity for violation of protocol." Lights began appearing above seats as delegates voted. Red for yes, blue for no. Arthur watched the pattern emerge, trying to calculate. "All opposed." More lights. The blue seemed to be spreading, but was it enough? Abstentions. A surprising number of yellow lights appeared. Fence-sitters, waiting to see which way the wind blew. The final tally appeared on the central display. For annulment, 117 against annulment, 143 abstaining 40. They'd won, by 26 votes. But they'd won. The chamber erupted. Drelmach's supporters protested, demanding recounts, claiming procedural violations. The progressives cheered. The veterans nodded approval. "This isn't over," Drelmach promised, his three eyes fixed on Arthur with naked hatred. "You've won a battle, not the war. The Alliance will rue this day." "Maybe," Arthur agreed. "But today, two people get to stay married because they choose to. That's worth a little rueing." Drelmach swept from the chamber, his supporters trailing behind. Others came forward, offering congratulations or warnings, sometimes both. "You've started something," Dr. Marin told them quietly. "I hope you're prepared for the consequences." "Honestly," Arthur laughed, exhaustion hitting him all at once. "I just wanted to get married. Everything else is improvisation." "The best human tradition," she replied, with what might have been amusement. As the chamber slowly emptied, Arthur and Salith found themselves alone on the platform where they'd made their stand. "We did it," Arthur said, still not quite believing. "The first battle?" Salith corrected. "Drelmach was right about one thing. This isn't over." "I know, but right now, can we just be two people who chose each other and won the right to keep choosing?" "Yes," she said softly. "We can be that." They left the chamber, hand in hand, walking into a future that no protocol could predict. Behind them, the traditional order of the Alliance shifted, just a little, making room for something new, something chosen, something human. The aftermath of victory tasted like cheap champagne and exhaustion. Arthur's quarters had become an impromptu celebration space, packed with supporters from a dozen species. Someone had brought Altarian wine that glowed faintly blue. A group of Gorvani youth were attempting to teach human protest songs to a bemused Carathian philosopher. In the corner, veterans swapped war stories that grew more elaborate with each telling. "To the Greys," someone shouted, raising a glass that contained something Arthur hoped was alcohol and not industrial solvent. To Choice came the response from 24 throats in half as many languages. Arthur found himself pressed against the wall, watching Salith navigate the crowd with newfound ease. She'd kept the simple dress, but added one piece of her old armor, a ceremonial shoulder guard that marked her as a veteran. The juxtaposition was perfect, warrior and woman in one frame. "You're thinking too loudly," she said, appearing at his elbow with 2 glasses of something that smelled like cinnamon and motor oil. "Just wondering when the other shoe drops," he admitted. "Drelmach didn't strike me as the gracious loser type." "He's not, but tonight is for victory. Tomorrow we can worry about retaliation." "Spoken like someone who's won a lot of battles." "Lost plenty too. The key is knowing which ones matter." She clinked her glass against his. This one mattered. Before Arthur could respond, the crowd parted to admit a new arrival. Dr. Marin, the Carathian sociologist who'd spoken in their defense, maneuvered her 4 arms through the pack of well-wishers. "Mr. and Mrs. Gray," she said warmly, "congratulations on your victory, and my condolences on what comes next." "That's ominous," Arthur noted. "Realistic. You've created a precedent. Do you know how many marriage contracts are being reconsidered across the Alliance tonight? My communication channels haven't stopped pinging since the vote." "Good," Salith said firmly. "Let them reconsider." "Oh, I agree. But change creates turbulence, and turbulence creates opportunity for those who thrive in chaos." Dr. Marin accepted a glass from a passing supporter. "Drelmach has already called for an emergency session of the Traditionalist Bloc. My sources say he's planning something dramatic. More dramatic than trying to annul our marriage and exile humanity." "That was politics. This will be personal." The party continued around them, but Arthur felt the temperature drop. "What do you mean?" "You humiliated him. Made him look weak in front of the entire Alliance. For someone like Drelmach, that's worse than death. He'll want revenge, and he has the resources to make it interesting." Let him come, Saleth growled. Spoken like a true warrior. But this won't be a battlefield you're familiar with. Drelmok fights with legislation, economic pressure, social manipulation. He'll try to break you without ever raising a weapon. Arthur set down his glass, his mind already spinning scenarios. So, what do we do? You build alliances. Real ones. Not just the emotional support you saw today. You need political backing, economic independence, and most importantly, you need to control your narrative. Dr. Marin's eyes gleamed. Lucky for you. I've always enjoyed a good revolution. Is that what this is, a revolution? What else would you call it? You've challenged the fundamental assumption that's governed Alliance society for generations. That's revolutionary by definition. The party swirled on, but Arthur found himself studying the crowd with new eyes. How many were here for the spectacle? How many truly supported change? How many would stand with them when Drelmok struck back? You're doing it again, Saleth observed, thinking like an engineer. Occupational hazard. I see systems everywhere. Good. We'll need that. She turned to Dr. Marin. You said we need alliances. Where do we start? With the obvious. The Progressive Coalition is eager, but disorganized. They need leadership. The Veterans Association has influence, but no clear agenda beyond better benefits. They need purpose. The Free Traders Guild opposes any restriction on personal freedom, including marriage contracts. They need a symbol. And we're supposed to be all of that. Arthur felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders like ill-fitting armor. You already are. The question is whether you'll embrace it or let others define you. Dr. Marin's expression grew serious. You have perhaps a week before Drelmok makes his move. Use it wisely. She departed, leaving Arthur and Saleth in a bubble of relative quiet amid the celebration. A week, Arthur mused. To build a coalition strong enough to withstand whatever Drelmok throws at us. No pressure. We've done more with less time, Saleth pointed out. We got married after knowing each other for 5 minutes. And look how well that turned out. Exactly, she smiled, and Arthur felt that familiar flutter in his chest. How had this ancient warrior made him feel like a teenager with a crush? The party finally wound down near dawn, leaving their quarters in spectacular disarray. Empty bottles created a constellation on the floor. Someone had left what appeared to be a Threnody prayer scroll draped over a lamp. In the corner, a young human woman Arthur didn't recognize was passed out, cuddling what looked like a potted plant from the hydroponics bay. Should we wake her? Arthur asked. Let her sleep. She's probably having better dreams than she'll have awake. Saleth began gathering bottles with military efficiency. You should rest too. Tomorrow will be complicated. What about you? Don't Sakarans need less sleep? Yes, but I find I sleep better with company. She paused, suddenly uncertain. If that's acceptable. It struck Arthur that for all their public intimacy, they'd never actually discussed the private aspects of their marriage. They'd been too busy fighting for the right to have it. More than acceptable, he said softly. Though I should warn you, I snore. I've slept through artillery bombardments. I think I can handle snoring. They prepared for bed with the careful courtesy of strangers learning to be familiar. Arthur found himself hyper-aware of every movement, every shared space. When was the last time he'd shared a bed with someone? 5 years? 3 months? 16 days? But who was counting? You're nervous, Saleth observed, settling beside him with surprising grace for someone her size. Terrified, he admitted. Fighting the Alliance Council. That was easy. This is... real. Yeah. Good. Real is worth being terrified of. She reached out, her 6 fingers enveloping his 5. We'll figure it out. Arthur Gray. We've done everything else backwards. Why not this? He laughed, tension breaking. Backwards and upside down. The Gray way.
I like the sound of that.
They lay in comfortable silence. hands linked, listening to the station's night cycle hum around them. Arthur was just drifting off when Salith spoke again.
I haven't told you about the message.
What message? From my daughter. Arthur's eyes snapped open.
You have a daughter. Had. She died 200 years ago. Natural causes. A life well lived. But her descendants survive. One of them messaged me today.
What did she say? That her 6 times great-grandmother would have loved this. Would have loved seeing me choose happiness over duty. Salith's voice carried centuries of memory. I'd forgotten that was possible. Choosing happiness. Arthur squeezed her hand. What else did she say? That I have family still, if I want it. That they've been watching, waiting for me to remember I'm more than a weapon. A pause. That they're proud of me. Of course they are. You're Salith Grey, warrior bride who told the Alliance to stuff their traditions. What's not to be proud of? She laughed. That avalanche sound muffled by proximity. You make everything sound simple. Because it is simple. We chose each other. Everything else is just paperwork.
Paperwork with teeth.
Then we'll file it properly, with extreme prejudice.
They drifted into sleep. 2 impossible people in an impossible situation. Hands linked against whatever dawn would bring.
Arthur woke to insistent chiming from his communication panel. The display showed 0637 hours and 16 urgent messages. Too early for a revolution, he groaned. Not for our enemies. Salith was already up, somehow looking battle-ready despite having slept in the same clothes. Check the news feeds. Arthur pulled up the holographic display and felt his stomach drop. The headlines scrolled past in multiple languages, but the message was clear. Marriage, scandal, Grey Union, under investigation for fraud. Drelmach calls for criminal charges against fake couple. Sources say human Sakaran marriage was pre-planned publicity stunt. That was fast, Arthur muttered. Read the details. He expanded one of the articles. Speed reading through allegations and insinuations. Anonymous sources claimed to have evidence that Arthur and Salith had met before their public encounter. That their marriage was a calculated attack on Alliance values. That human extremist groups had orchestrated the whole thing to destabilize traditional structures. It's all lies, Arthur said.
Of course it is. But lies with just enough possibility to create doubt.
Salith studied the feeds with a warrior's eye for terrain.
He's not trying to prove we're guilty. He's trying to make us look guilty. Different battle.
So how do we fight it? With the truth. But first, coffee. Even warriors need caffeine when facing character assassination. They made it halfway to the kitchen before the door chimed. Arthur checked the security feed and groaned. A crowd of reporters had gathered outside, their equipment already recording. They're persistent, Salith noted. They smell blood. Drelmach gave them a narrative. Now they want our response. So we give them one. Just like that?
Why not? We've been honest so far. Why stop now?
Arthur considered this. His instinct was to hide, to wait for the storm to pass. But that was the old Arthur, the one who'd spent 5 years hiding in maintenance shafts. All right, he decided. But I'm not facing the media apocalypse in yesterday's clothes. 20 minutes later, they opened the door. Arthur had found a clean jumpsuit that didn't scream, unemployed maintenance worker, while Salith had added more pieces of her armor, creating an impression of strength without aggression.
The questions hit like plasma fire.
Mr. Grey, how do you respond to allegations that your marriage was pre-planned? Mrs. Grey, did human extremist groups contact you before the wedding? Is it true you've been receiving payments from the Progressive Coalition? Arthur held up a hand, waiting for relative quiet. One at a time. And let's start with facts instead of allegations. Fact 1. I met my wife for the first time at Dock 47 exactly as recorded. Fact 2. Neither of us has received payments from anyone. I couldn't even get my last paycheck from maintenance. Fact 3. The only extremist thing about our marriage is how extremely happy we are despite everyone's best efforts. But the sources. Anonymous sources making unprovable claims. That's not journalism. That's gossip. Arthur found his stride. You want a story? Here's one. Drelmach is so threatened by two people choosing love over politics that he's manufacturing scandals. Ask yourself why.
Are you saying the Chancellor is lying?
I'm saying he's scared. Scared that if people see us succeed, they'll start questioning why they can't choose too. Scared that his power depends on keeping people in boxes. Arthur felt Saleth's approval like warmth at his back. We're not revolutionaries. We're just married. The fact that terrifies him should tell you everything. A Threnody reporter pushed forward. But surely you understand the concerns about precedent. The only precedent we've set is that two consenting adults can choose each other. If that threatens civilization, then civilization has bigger problems than us. Mrs. Gray, another reporter called. Your military file has been leaked. It shows disciplinary actions, questioning of orders. Were you planning this rebellion for years? Saleth smiled, showing teeth. My disciplinary actions were for refusing to fire on civilians, questioning illegal orders, and once for telling a superior officer that his tactical planning would embarrass a first-year cadet. If that's rebellion, then yes. I've been rebelling my whole career against stupidity.
But the marriage?
The marriage was a surprise to everyone, including us.
You want to know the truth? I was ready to die that day. Not physically, but spiritually. Ready to accept that I'd outlived my usefulness, that I was just an embarrassment to be managed. Her voice hardened. Then, this ridiculous human made a ridiculous offer, and for the first time in decades, I remembered what hope felt like. That's not a conspiracy. That's a miracle. The crowd had grown during their impromptu conference. Beyond the reporters, Arthur saw regular station residents gathering, listening. Some nodded along. Others looked skeptical. But they were all paying attention. Final question, Arthur announced. Then we need breakfast. What's your next move?
This from Tara Hendricks, the sharp-faced human reporter from yesterday. Lunch, Arthur said. Then dinner. Maybe a walk in the observation deck. You know, married people things. You're not taking this seriously. I'm taking it exactly as seriously as it deserves. Drelmach wants us to panic, to lash out, to give him ammunition. Instead, we're going to live our lives. Publicly. Openly. Boringly. Let him explain why a happy marriage threatens the galaxy. They retreated inside, leaving the media to digest that. Arthur slumped against the door. Boringly, Saleth questioned.
Is that your grand strategy? Actually, yes. Think about it. Drelmach needs us to be rebels, revolutionaries, threats to order. What if we're just normal A-couple dealing with cultural differences and snoring, and whose turn it is to take out the recycling?
Weaponized domesticity.
The most human weapon of all. Stubborn normalcy in the face of cosmic opposition.
Saleth considered this.
It might work, or it might bore us both to death.
Well, we've got to make it interesting for ourselves. Just boring for everyone else. They managed breakfast without further interruption, though Arthur caught Saleth glancing at the news feeds every few minutes. The leaked military file was spreading, but so were analyses defending her service record. Veterans groups were particularly vocal, pointing out that every disciplinary action had saved lives. We need to see Dr. Marin, Saleth decided. If we're building alliances, we need to move fast. Agreed. But first, Arthur pulled up his credit account. We need to deal with a practical problem. I've got enough savings for maybe a month. You resigned your commission, so no pension. We need income.
I could seek mercenary work.
Or, Arthur interrupted, we could try something less likely to get you killed. You've got 3 centuries of tactical experience. I've got engineering skills and a talent for fixing broken systems. Maybe we market that. As what consultants? Why not the Gray Advisory Group? We fix your problems, whether they're technical, tactical, or political.
That's ridiculous.
Which means it's perfect for us. Before Salith could respond, their communication panel lit up with an urgent message. Dr. Marin's face appeared, her expression grim. We need to meet immediately, she said without preamble. Drelmock's made his move, and it's worse than I thought.
What kind of worse? Arthur asked.
The kind that changes everything. He's not just trying to annul your marriage anymore. He's introducing legislation to ban all interspecies marriages that don't meet strict genetic and political criteria. Arthur felt the words hit like a physical blow.
He can't do that.
He can try. And with the traditionalist bloc behind him, he might succeed. Dr. Marin's image flickered with interference. Meet me at the Progressive Coalition headquarters. We have maybe 4 days to stop this. The transmission cut off, leaving Arthur and Salith staring at each other.
So much for boring, Salith said quietly.
Yeah, Arthur ran a hand through his hair. Looks like we're revolutionaries whether we want to be or not. Then we'd better be good ones. Salith stood, warrior straight. Get dressed, husband. We have a war to win. With what army? The one we're about to build, she smiled, fierce and beautiful. After all, we've done everything else impossible. Why not this? They prepared quickly, Arthur's mind already racing through possibilities. Drelmock had escalated, turning their personal stand into a species-wide battle. But in doing so, he'd also given them something precious, a cause bigger than themselves. You know, Arthur said as they headed for the door, I'm starting to think he played right into our hands.
How so?
We were just two people who fell in love. Hard to build a movement on that. But now, we're fighting for everyone's right to choose. That's a revolution people can believe in. Assuming we can rally them in 4 days?
Hey, we got married in 5 minutes. 4 days is practically an eternity.
They emerged from their quarters to find the corridor filled with beings. Not reporters this time, but regular people, humans and aliens, young and old, all watching them with expressions that ranged from hope to determination. Mr. Gray, a young Gorvani said, patches flickering nervously.
We want to help. Tell us what to do.
Arthur looked at the crowd, then at Salith, then back at the unexpected army gathering before them. First, he said, feeling the mantle of leadership settle on his shoulders, we organize, then we fight. Not with weapons, but with voices, with votes, with the radical idea that love is not a commodity to be regulated. A cheer went up, multilingual and heartfelt. The Gray Advisory Group's first case, Salith murmured. Saving the galaxy's right to choose? No pressure, Arthur replied. But as they moved through the crowd, accepting offers of help, coordinating with supporters, Arthur felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years' purpose. Real. Burning. This matter's purpose. Drelmock wanted a war fine. But it wouldn't be fought on his terms. It would be fought with hope and humor, with love and determination. It would be fought the human way messily, chaotically, and with the absolute conviction that choice mattered more than control. The revolution had begun, and it started with breakfast.